Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening to you all.
Grazie per essere qui. Salutiamo anche
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. We'd like to welcome also our gong players who are welcome back. They're not the same that we had the other times in the previous conferences. For very practical reasons, it was not possible to have them on stage, but I would like to recall that they're two volunteers that were forced to be volunteers and were selected, and they have one question each to interrupt when they wish. So it's a surprise interruption by the question. Usually frighten the speaker with a gong. Try it out. See if, because we haven't used it for years, so yes, put more energy into that. Even with a little bit less energy. A sort of in the middle of the road decision. It was just a joke, yes. You have the gong and a microphone, which is there, and let's see if the mic works. And we'll ask you to introduce yourselves. Name and where you come from.
Sono Nicolò e frequento la facoltà.
My name is Nicolò, and I'm a biotechnology student. It has to do with the evening.
Io sono Rebecca e frequento tecnico
my
di
name is
laboratorio
Rebecca,
biomedico, sanitarie.
and I am a biomedical lab technician.
Bene, allora, terzo incontro, è l'ultimo di questa prima parte della stagione.
Meeting and the last in this part of the season. We'll then reconvene in January. And we're going to close this in style, or as you say in Italian, in beauty. We're talking about the makeup that is used and of the tricks that hide behind the makeup. Tricks behind tricks. And it's Beatrice Mautino who will be talking to us this evening. Yes, it's the same one that you will see in the pictures. She is a biotechnologist with a PhD in neurosciences, and I think the two are connected. But above all, she is a populaiser, because after her doctorate, she decided to abandon research and to move on to popularization. She has organized scientific communication. She was in charge of the conferences at the Genoa conferences, or Genoa, in fact, Cycle on Science, and then also the Mantua one with Alberto, yes, with me. I said, that's why I said it. And she also has a monthly column on the magazine called Mensile, which means monthly, and instead of being Occam's razor, it's Occam's wax. And she has a Facebook page with the same, or by the same name, which she updates continuously. So I would say that without any further ado, let's give her the floor. But first of all the things, well, not everything, or most of what she says this evening is in this book, which is It's a Trick Baby, Il trucco c'è ma non si vede. It's a trick baby, but you can't see it. And it's an ongoing process. This book starts in a supermarket, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I like going to supermarkets. It's leisure for me. It's enjoyment. I love going around supermarkets. I spend a lot of time when I'm not working with Alberto. But not only because it's pleasure, but also because it's work. Yes, because supermarkets are a source of ideas and curiosity. We all go to the supermarket, and there is a lot of science in the supermarket, although it is hidden behind cosmetics or food. Or I have a fixation about cosmetics and everyday food. And so at this point, if you'll allow me, I'll get up and see if this works, because I'm trying to be super technological. And I will show you the beginning of all the story. The first moment in which I understood that my book would have been written as it then was. All started in a supermarket when I came across this. You can see it here. It's a bit used because I use it at home, and it's soap. I was shopping at the supermarket and I was looking for soap to wash my hands, and I saw this because it said, as you can see it, it's called a non-soap soap. And I said, well, why would a person who wishes to buy a hand soap would buy a non-soap? What is it in your mind that makes you talk or makes you buy a non-soap instead of a soap? Why are you afraid of soap if you're buying soap? Why are you looking for something alternative? Why? Do you want something that won't wash? I mean, there are different opinions on this and on washing. Here, as you can see, I started analyzing it with a rather critical outview. And a non-soap, as you can see it here, it's printed on its bottle. It says 0%. It says what it doesn't contain. It doesn't contain parabens. It doesn't contain SLESs or PEGs, synthetic coloring. It doesn't contain any propylene glycol. Well, does it mean that it doesn't contain anything? Yes, but it's colored. Yes, so it must have non-synthetic dyes. In fact, it does contain things. If you turn it round, there are always lots of letters at the back. You see, there's a lot of stuff written here. And you can see that dermatologically it's being tested, and it hasn't been tested on animals. It's been tested for nickel and cobalt and cadmium. And you can see on the right all the things that it contains, where there are lots of other things. Now, looking at the soap, I understood that of all the things that are written there, I didn't quite understand any of it. I didn't know exactly what. You see, there are a lot of labels there, too. I didn't know what they meant. I didn't know the meaning of all the names of the ingredients. Very often, they're very difficult names that refer to chemistry. Maybe they're frightening because they're difficult. Although non-soap is all natural, but there are things inside. So I wondered, in one course of a mystical moment, I said, I have to write the Rosetta Stone to interpret soap. People have small ambitions in life or big ambitions, but the whole book is aimed at deciphering this and many others, because since it contains all of this, it's a sort of summary of the things that you may find on makeup. So I started looking up all of these. There's one that I would like to focus on, and then maybe if there are questions on the others, we can talk about it. And it's this ingredient. And that is to say, sodium lauryl sarcosinate. Now, I don't know if it's natural. If there are chemists here, they will know that it's a detergent. Technically, it's not a soap from a chemical point of view. So this makes it possible to the owners of the brand to write that it's a soap that isn't a soap, because there is a detergent inside. Is it a natural detergent? I think that the people with white hair do know it. The name probably doesn't mean anything to you like this, but if I show you this name, Gardal, I know that those who used to watch the advertising program, which was on television many years ago, called Carosello, you would recognize Gardol. Gardol was an ingredient from the United States, because in the 50s and 60s, anything that came from the United States was good. And it was presented as a synthetic. And a synthetic element. So it's a soap that isn't a soap, but it contains Gardol, which is synthetic. But in fact, I'm showing you this because at the time, Gardol was introduced as the opposite of soap, non-soap, anything but natural. Those were the days when unnatural or synthetic things were considered good, in inverted commas. You see, this is the advertisement of a detergent, Pral, and it says universal, synthetic, and detergent. So if I go to the supermarket and instead of finding eco-bio, if you were in the 50s, you would have found synthetic. Probably myself and the three chemists in the room will understand what it is, but nowadays the word synthetic, the word chemical, has taken on a negative meaning. So if at one time people were pushing science, technology, and innovation, now people are holding back. If I were to tell you that in the past it was like that, and now it's all soap, non-soap, I would be oversimplifying it, and I don't like doing that. Why? Because nowadays, we are experiencing an inner conflict. On the other hand, one hand, we like science and technology, and so we want a product to do something, and we want it to have science and technology, but we're also a bit afraid of it. So we're constantly accelerating and then braking. I'll give you a few examples, a few cases in point. This, I don't know if you know it. It is a very expensive cream, Swiss. I chose this one. I could have chosen another one. They are in a very expensive bracket of the market, about 300 euros. A lot of money. When I saw this advertisement, and these are one of the things that are not in the book, but I'd written the book and I was queuing up at the post office and I didn't know what to do. So I was on Facebook and I found this advertisement from Marie Claire. It's a women's magazine, it's glossy, and it says, have you ever asked yourselves what there is behind the price of a product? Yes, because you want to know why that little tiny jar costs 300 euros. And I found a description of the product which looked a lot like a newspaper article. Looked like one of many articles, and it says all the products of the Le Prairie collection in fact contain a cell complex. I am a biotechnologist, as Alberto said. Are you aware of the cell complex? No? No, they must ask questions, not you. Well, you can interrupt yourself if you want to, but it doesn't mean anything. Somebody said from the first row. Didn't mean anything, really. But they then explained what the exclusive cell complex is concerned. It is a prodigy, the potential of which is endless. And we are considering exclusive because we try to keep it secret. It's something which is a prodigy of nature, but it's also a secret of nature and of them. This is a cream with caviar, and I'd like to tell you a story about this. A friend of mine who's here this evening, but I won't tell you anything, said that when he went to the airport, there was a sample being offered. And, you know, you take them because they're free. But since there's caviar in it for the 8 hours, he stank to the high skies. Caviar was created in a new form. Caviar, usually it's the fish that make caviar, has been created in a new form thanks to an advanced technology able to absorb the most effective nutrients. I've put some in pink, that's me. And they're the ones that give the idea of science and technology. But then, I'm not going to read it all, there's a long, long segment which refers to the inventor of this cream and the founder of La Prairie. This Dr. Paul Nihans, who is a father of the cell therapy, and we have lots of them. We've had people talking about this, Michele De Luca and others, gene therapy. But Dr. Paul Nihans, who is described as a visionary person, someone I'd never really heard, but might be my fault. So again, while I was still at the post office in the queue, I Googled his name, and I got information like this in the first page, because the advertisement, you know, again, is sort of cut and paste. But on page 2, which as experts is the best place to bury your corpses, because nobody ever goes to page 2. Page 2 had contained a very interesting article. And in fact, this article mentioned an infection that had affected 10-15 people who'd gone to this Dr. Nihans. These were desperate people, but they had fatal diseases, and they went to him, and what did he do? He took fetal cells from lambs and veals and injected them. That was the cell therapy. There was a problem linked to hygiene, the lack of it, in fact, and they got an infection. Now, surprise of the scientific community. Of course, obviously, he started new life and started making creams and stopped damaging people. But if that article, original article I was talking about, had been a scientific article and not a piece of advertisement, rather than celebrating the person, we would have also mentioned that. And again, I refer you to page 2 of Google. But today I'm not so interested in talking about the problems of information, but the type of language that is used, the words which I showed you in pink. If you go home and you read the newspapers and magazines and look at all the advertisements, you will find a lot of words very like it. Now look at this. You'll find this, for instance, in pharmacies, in chemists. And Mineral 89, the spa water from Vichy, from the French volcanoes, that has a very powerful, natural, active ingredient. For the first time, the Vichy laboratories have developed, again, this prodigy through a concentration of water at 89%. Other than the fact, why would you concentrate water? No reason. Is it right? Is it wrong? We don't know what it is. But what I would like you to focus on is the number 89. It's not 90, it's 89. Had it been 90, it would have seemed a bit of an approximation, 90. While 89 gives you the idea that there's someone who is actually, somebody wearing a white coat who's actually measuring things. 88, 89, yes, there it is. So if you are careful, if you look at the advertisements, especially the anti-wrinkle ones, they're a very specific number. 83% of all women use this product and we're very happy with it. 96% of all your wrinkles, etc. Very specific numbers. In fact, the price usually also has a 9 at the end, yes, but that's another choice. Mineral 89 does a lot of things, and we hope that French volcanoes do not produce this type of water. In any case, those words in pink are part of an invented language, which I am going to call science-like language. So it's science-like language, baby. It sounds like a scientific language, but unlike scientific language, where a word corresponds to a concept or to a notion, H2O can't mean two different things, it means water. But in science-like, then they have to sound like science, that is to say, cell complex. But then there's never an actual definition, a clear definition of what it means. Yes. Science-like language refers to some of our brain. Those of us who are not chemists or who have no such training see the world in a very different way to others. I don't know if this is the right slide. No, I haven't. But I have another slide. That leads me to a quiz, because science-like has a positive but also a negative connotation. You might have heard people talking about parabens. Our soap that isn't soap doesn't contain parabens. It's paraben-free. You see here, paraben-free. Parabens are preservatives that are used to preserve products to avoid that bacteria should grow on them. They have been used for many a year, but in the past few years, about 10, 14, they have been accused of many things that I will be illustrating in a moment, and as a result, consumers are a bit concerned about it. And if consumers are concerned about it, then the companies should try to remedy. The exercise which I would like you now to do is to guess what molecules we're talking about. They're not difficult molecules. So I'm not asking you to produce very difficult names, but I'm sure you've all come across them on the basis of a story that I'm now going to tell you. This is the story. In 2007, an article was published on a very important journal, the New England Journal of Medicine, that referred to a very worrying event that had happened to boys, and following their use of products with these elements or this molecule, which I am not going to mention, had problems in developing breasts during the pre-pubertal years. And that's a big problem. So the parents were very concerned. They went to doctors, and the researchers found out that all these children had made use of products that contain these ingredients. They also carried out experiments in the lab. They took some breast cells, they cultured them, They also added the ingredient, and they saw that they behaved in an estrogen-like manner, like female hormones. Very worrying. For 7 years, other research groups carried out experiments, and after 7 years, in 2014, a study was published. It's what was known as a meta-analysis, that is to say, a review putting together all the studies and questioned the effectiveness or the reliability of the initial paper, saying that the experiment hadn't been carried out properly, the numbers were too low, and so on. The experiment with cells was very probably a false positive. That is to say, the result was positive, but linked to situations that had nothing to do with the ingredient that had been added. And so they had spoken about these ingredients and said that they were safe. What am I talking about? Soy, somebody says. I'm not going to ask them. You told me to say parabens. I didn't tell him. But yes, yesterday I did this at a conference of chemists who work in cosmetic industries or in manufacturers, and they all guessed it was parabens. Then there's another one, lavender and tea tree oils. Now, certainly you shouldn't throw away all the soap cakes that contain lavender. Of this story that finished in 2014 but that lasted for 7 years, we were totally unaware. This is normal because there are tens and tens of studies that are published every year, and we're not aware of all of them. Science works like this. You make a hypothesis, you hypothesize, you test it, and then your hypothesis is either proved or disproved. We didn't hear anything because these ingredients are ingredients that we all use and perceive as, quote, natural. We're not afraid of them. So the same thing that had happened with parabens. Parabens had been accused in 2004 with an article where they measured the concentration of parabens in human breast cancers of women who had received a mastectomy. In this case, there were very few women, and so much so that in years to follow, there have been a number of studies, here you can see some, that disproved the risk of parabens. In 2000 and something, I can't really read it, up there, what is it? 2008, yes. In 2008, this article was published in a French journal analyzing the whole story and proved that parabens were not linked to breast cancer for a number of reasons, because there is no direct correlation between the tumor and the use of parabens. It is true that they're estrogen-like, but it is tens of thousands of times lower than that of real estrogens, like soy, as you were mentioning earlier on. So they were completely disproved. But if today you Google parabens, you get a number of things. These are two that I recently downloaded from an internet bio site, and the other one on Facebook. And if you see the text, it's very worrying. It's you talk about cancer, breast cancer, and it's on the list of projects to avoid, which for the tea tree oil and for lavender is not done, because parabens represent or stand for the world of chemistry and innovation, which we're afraid of, which is why we overestimate the concerns and underestimate all the signals that come from a world that we call a safe world. We have time, but I would like to ask you a question. In terms of perception of something being natural and therefore safe, how do you produce this lavender oil from a practical point of view? How do you produce essential oils? Well, we all think, at least I was a bit naive before I started working in a lab. I thought that essential oils were made by people dressed in sort of linen with the straw hats that happily went gathering lavender. Well, lavender is still gathered by or harvested by hand, but the production of essential oils is a totally chemical process. There are fermenting vats, various things, equipment, instruments, solvents, extractors, so that in the end it is a chemical process. Yes, the idea of an extract gives you an idea as if you were going to squeeze an orange. But you might say, paraben-free, but it must have a preservative of some sort, because I've been going around with this bottle for a year, Lorma presentation, and there is still no mold on it, because it has a preservative inside. Otherwise, it could not resist more than 2 or 3 days. Imagine that you prepare mayonnaise at home and then you put it in an open jar and you leave it in the bathroom, which is very damp. How long will it last? A day, 2 days? And then after that, you'll see all sorts of things growing on it. If it's paraben-free, there must be something else. This contains phenoxyethanol. It's a story that is very interesting because it's a bit like parabens. It too was considered toxic for children, and the French Health and Safety Organization considered it dangerous. At that point, there was a series of products that were phenoxyethanol free, and instead of that, they had put a molecule that is called phenethyl alcohol, that is not legally a preservative, but it behaves like one. It has a structure, a chemical structure, which is similar. Please, chemists, don't object to this. Don't listen to what I'm saying. But maybe there wasn't such a big fuss as there were for parabens, but now it's being used. Now, a friend of mine brought me a bubble bath from a very famous children's brand, and it was paraben-free, but it contained phenoxyethanol, which has been listed as being toxic for children. So there are a bit of inconsistencies here and there in the communication that is made. Another thing, which is rather curious and which is also mentioned in the book, is this. Probably you don't know it. This is the extract of grapefruit seeds. It was used a lot, and now it isn't. And it was used as a natural preservative, and it worked very well, and it works so well that some scientists said it's working too well for it. And they started analyzing it, and they found anything in it and everything in it. Preservatives, disinfectants, all the parabens of the world. And so they said either grapefruit seeds are a manufacturing plant or there's something which isn't true. So they asked the manufacturers to have a description of the production process. They gave it to them. They tried to reproduce it, and the result, the outcome, was completely different. So they discovered that this was a fraud in the sense that they did produce the extract, and then they used to take the disinfectant and just pour it inside. When they were discovered, they had to stop manufacturing it, and we went back to the original natural grapefruit seed extract, which works but not as well, obviously, as it did before. So when you talk about the world of cosmetics, how did you begin? Well, I began going to the supermarket, trying to understand what was in it, and then I discovered these incredible stories that lie behind all these products. Now, this is the slide I wanted to show you before. Let's go back to the science-like language. This way of talking, of throwing around big names, reflects on the way we think, which is very different from the way in which a chemist thinks. Let's see how a chemist thinks. This face is not new to me. Yes, he is the most famous chemist on YouTube. And this photo in particular was taken when he was slicing onions, a very dangerous chemical reaction, of course. But chemists see the world in a rather different way. For a chemist, matter is made out of atoms and molecules and forces that keep them together. Atoms and molecules. Even if you can't see these forces, they're there. So a molecule is defined by its chemical structure, regardless of what its origin is. Whether Alberto made something or the gong player made something doesn't make a difference. If it's been taken from one place or another, it doesn't make a difference because its structure is all that matters. So a molecule from a plant or a molecule that comes from another part, if they have the same structure, they're the same. And then for a chemist, doses are important. For us too. We know that when we take a drug, a medicine, we have to take it in a given dose. But when we go to a supermarket and we buy cosmetics, we lose the sense of proportion. Here, atoms and molecules. These are three very well-known fruits, and this is how a chemist will see them. For a chemist, inside a banana, there are all those things that are listed there. Well, they are there. Sugars, but what? Sugars. It's not that simple. What does sugar mean? Vitamins, all those things. For us, things are a bit different. We see them like this, meaning that bananas are made of banana molecules, and so on, so forth. What we find inside a banana is different for us than what we find inside myrtles or blueberries. Think, for example, of a jam, where it says without any added sugar. And you say, great, that's good for the diet. But then they add, say, grape juice. It's sugar. But it isn't. It's grape juice. It is sugar. But for us, it isn't sugar. It's grape juice. I'm convinced that if I were to label fruit like this at the supermarket, no one would buy the fruit anymore, because they would say, that contains chemistry. Is it paraben-free? Yes, they're paraben-free. Yes, these don't. These don't. An example on cosmetics. You must have heard people talking about sulfates. And so it's SLS and SLAES free. Shampoos that are free of them. Question? No, I was wondering if the SLES, is it the same one? Yes, it's the one that this one hasn't got. It's free. Soap hasn't got anything in it, so it's fine. That's why I said that you can wear it with everything. It's like black. So here this is LSS free and SLES, and they have a very bad reputation that started from this letter that circulated in the early 2000s. And I was then working in a lab here, very close to where we are, and I'd received this, and it says at the Bergamo hospital we have discovered that blah, blah, blah. And so I was very curious, and so I followed it back. I discovered that it was a circular one. Others followed it back and discovered that the message came from the United States by chance. It had reached the mailbox of a secretary or an admin person in the Bergamo University, and they circulated like we do now with WhatsApp. But at the bottom of the email it said such and such a person from the hospital of Bergamo, and it became the hospital of Bergamo. So there was the same that was also with the Institute of Oncology. Now, this started in the States, and there again it had a similar trail, but it's baseless. We know that it's a detergent. As a detergent, it's slightly irritating, but it certainly does not cause cancer. But we find SLS-free products. Why? Well, when we see SLS, unless we're chemists, we don't see the molecule. We imagine something chemical. This is the structure, it's a long chain, and other things. SLS is produced by various sources, and one of them is coconut oil. Coconut oil contains some fatty acids. Half of them are lauric or lauryl acid. What does a chemist do if they have to produce LSS? They fraction the coconut oil, only keeps the lauryl acid, treats it with reagents, I don't know, sulfuric acid, mix it all together, and then they will get the sodium lauryl sulfate. This is a detergent, but a chemist can do something a bit different. A chemist can take all three, not fraction these acids, and treat them with the reagents I mentioned, that is to say caustic soda and H2SO4. The mixture will have a 50% of sodium lauryl sulfate, SLS, and then they will have ministic and palmitic acids, it's 3 different types of sulfates. Now, if I were to ask you, would you prefer a shampoo with SLS or the one with a mixture of the 3 sulfates? Which would you choose? Well, who cares? As long as it washes your hair. This is because I told it to you like this, but if I had said to you that this mixture is now called cocosulfate, cocosulfate is a name that recalls beaches and coconuts and palm trees, gives us an idea. It's not a molecule, it's a mixture of molecules, where 50% is SLS. But the fact that it's called cocosulfates has changed its reputation. And so today we can find shampoos that say SLS-free, but with cocosulfate, which is also 50% SLS, but legally it can be defined SLS-free. The name changes the reputation of an ingredient. The fact that we define it natural gives it an entirely new face. Another 2 examples. On the origin of the molecule. A few months ago, a young girl on Instagram wrote to me and said that the origin is not important. The important thing is the structure of the molecule. But when I take the iron as a drug, I have side effects, while when I take it as an integrator, I haven't got any side effects. Well, I said, please, can we check it and see what's inside? And she said, my body clearly knows that one is chemical and the other one's natural. Well, let us see. Her body knows that one has 300 milligrams, while the other one has 3 milligrams in the whole bottle. So 300 milligrams in each tablet, as opposed to 3 milligram in the whole bottle. So to have the same quantity of iron, you should drink 100 bottles of it. And also, they're very expensive, so the body doesn't know that one is chemical and the other one's natural, so to speak. But the body can certainly perceive the difference in quantities, and just like chemists do. Here's one last example. As we know, for chemists, doses are what make it a poison or not. And I was really surprised by this new shampoo, because as well as having the fact that it suggests that your hair can breathe and hair is dead, so it certainly can't breathe. And so it has something very special. That is to say, it washes, cleans, it purifies your hair thanks to moringa. Do you know what a moringa is? It's the new oil of argan. Every year we have a new one. I don't know what, it's like a Chinese horoscope. No, it's next year's. I've already seen some products with Aptium lapta. And it also says that it's against pollution, because the moringa is produces seeds that are used to purify water. In those areas, it might be that the water is very cloudy with a lot of bacteria, and to reduce it, reduce the bacterial load. It's something that is done there. So these are the features that you can define them as a purifying agent. It has been added to these shampoos that were presented by one of these influencers that said she was a pharmacy student, and it said that this shampoo was able to eliminate 94% of all the carbon particles of hair. That is to say, hair. So you're left with 6% of your hair, if that were true. So I wrote to her and said, maybe reword that, reword it in a different way. In any case, other than this, these shampoos say that they contain moringa. Now, a person, me too, before starting to think like a chemist, I go to the supermarket and see that it has wheat, it has moringa, and you imagine that this will work because it has these ingredients. In any case, they're all different. It means that they have different ingredients. Now, the question is, how much moringa is there inside? I don't know if you know, but ingredients are listed in an order, and it starts with the first one that is the largest or has the largest quantity, and it goes down. But this was the one but last. This was less than preservatives. The moringa is something you've probably seen on a postcard, but the fact that it is there, even very little of it, makes it possible in terms of marketing for you to use it as the ingredient to attract people, the magnet ingredient. It has no scientific basis, but you can advertise with it. And this is based on the fact that when we see the presence of an ingredient, we think that it works. And it works only because it's there, that it's good or bad, according to the reputation that it has.
No, ma doveva suonare lui, se poi...
Vabbè, ho delegato...
Mi piace il gong.
No, if you were asking the question, you had to play the gong. You like gongs, don't you?
Ok, volevo fare... Si sente?
Prova, adesso. No? Quando c'è la lucina accesa, accendila. Ecco.
Adesso posso parlare? Ok, perfetto. Volevo fare una domanda in realtà. Ultimamente, non ultimamente in realtà, quest'estate mi sono interessato molto a quelli che sono i prodotti per
Right, so I was interested in that, and they were saying that shampoos and conditioners dried your hair. Now, they were using the Italian term balsamo when they were talking about conditioners. And then they said, but conditioners, using the word in English, don't dry your hair. And so I was wondering what it made. And hair conditioners now, using the English term, have become very common. And I would like to know what it means. And in fact, I've been told that balsami and conditioners are exactly the same thing. One is the translation of the other. So they're not changing the product, they're just changing the product's name in the translation. And you'd like to know why they're calling it hair conditioner. Well, I realized this because you were talking about lauryl sulfates and the fact that a friend of mine was asking me because she had reached a conclusion. So while I was looking at the different shampoos, I noticed that what they contained, but I avoided them. But maybe you could explain, you could shed some light on this issue. I think there's not much to say on it. But yes, I don't know why and what is behind it. Well, neuroscientists, you did it because when we're told that something can harm us, since we're not talking about life-saving medicines or these are products, I'm not saying that they're unnecessary, but superfluous, but you can choose one or the other, for sure. So when you have doubt, clearly, even though you have a scientific type of training, you start looking for a product that is free of that substance. So thank you for the question, because it enables me to say something which I forgot to say, so much so that the European Commission advises, it's not a law, so I can't say it forces, it advises companies not to analyze products by describing them as being free of something. If, for example, SL, S's is authorized, then it has been tested and it's safe. And so you shouldn't say that something is free. The fact that you're writing on a product without this or free of this and free of the other is trying to swindle consumers, because if you're taking it out, the consumer was saying that it will think that it's bad for them. But it shouldn't be bad if it has been authorized. So either it's unauthorized or it's authorized. So the European Commission advises against writing without. Everybody does it, and so there's nothing we can do about it. So I'm sure that the European Commission has now accepted it. But I still wanted to, if I have time, wanted to add something, which is linked to the fact, let's not now talk about what is good and bad, but on the reasons why we often buy a product rather than another one. We buy, say, a wrinkle cream because we don't want wrinkles. And this is not for young people, but for example, you might have other problems like cellulitis. Scientific experiments carried out on cosmetics tell us that in most cases they don't work. From a legal point of view, they can't even work because cosmetics are not medicines or drugs, but so they can't have a therapeutic activity. This is the legal definition. So they can't treat a disease, they can't solve a chronic problem such as wrinkles or cellulitis, which is inherent to women. If they were able to do so, they would be reclassed as drugs. So it's treatment of the body, and their effect can be therapeutical. For example, a hydrating cream may improve the state of your skin, but it can't solve or address problems that are serious problems. We use them, and we feel that they use, especially if we spend a lot of money for them. For instance, I have this cream. A reader of mine brought it to me. It's empty, unfortunately, of a very famous brand, very heavy. Even though it's empty, it's heavy. And she said, this costs 400 euros. And if you look at it, it's not much, there's not much room for the cream inside. 400 euros. The fact that it costs 400 euros as opposed to this one, which we bought in the supermarket in Spain, cost 5 euros, must mean that you believe that the 400 one has something extra. It's like the one that contains caviar. There must be. We're led to believe that there must be something good in it. So a group of Swedish researchers carried out an experiment. They took a group of women, about 60, divided them into 3 groups, and asked them to test it. The first group received the Chanel cream, very expensive, with about 50 ingredients, a lot of declared properties. You see this golden color and so on. And every morning they were supposed to put it on. The second group was tricked. That is to say, they gave them the Chanel, the Chanel cream jar, but in fact there was the supermarket cream in it. And the third group were tricked, but the other way around. They had a Nivea basic supermarket cream, but they put the Chanel ones. First of all, they measured with calcs before and after the treatment to measure the wrinkles, so with the software to see if they had been affected. And the good or bad news is that there was absolutely no difference between the 3 groups. No difference between before and after, not a lot. People who had wrinkles still had wrinkles. Well, but then they did something else. That is to say, the perception. Before telling them that there was no difference in it, they said, how do you see yourself? And the curious thing, the 2 curious things, are the ones that in groups A and B, that is to say, the ones that had the luxury cream had used much more than the ones in the group. You may understand why, because it was a freebie, like the samples at an airport. You just lap it on. In the B group, they saw themselves as being younger. They thought their skin had improved, although, in fact, when they were their wrinkles were measured, they had no difference to report. So they thought they were more beautiful. The ones in group C that didn't know they were holding a treasure, they said, well, it's a cream, nothing much. They couldn't see any improvement. They said, in any case, how could they change? I had Nivea while all the others had the deodorant. Well, I added this. This wasn't included in the study. So, or the Chanel. The conclusion of the researchers was that we can't talk about a placebo effect because there was no placebo effect. You should have carried out a more serious neuroscientific research. That is to say, you'd have to have an effect to measure and to start with on wrinkles, but they were hypothesizing it. Maybe if we carried out the experiment in a different way, we might see it. But you know, since public research has a lot of problems and very little funding, so I don't think that wrinkles are a priority. But although they didn't talk about a placebo effect, they spoke about the influence that our brain has in overestimating some of the small changes that might be due to a product that we believe is more effective because it's more expensive. So the fact that it costs a lot means that our brain suggests that we think that we're more beautiful if we're using it. And I don't think this is negative in the sense that in the end, the objective of a cosmetic is to make us feel happier and more beautiful or feeling more beautiful. So if a product, only in reason of the fact that it's expensive, makes us feel more beautiful and we've got the money, there's nothing wrong with that. That is to say, you decide to buy it because it's more expensive, so probably it will be better. And once you've bought it, well, you say, well, it'll be better because of all the money I spent, or you decided it. So I see myself as being more beautiful. In this case, they hadn't paid for it. One of the problems, in fact, was that they hadn't really paid for it. So they should have carried out different experiments. So the end of the story, if there is an end to this story, is that the definition of a cosmetic is chemical, but it's also the background, because these are products that have a very important image, and that their image will affect our image. So it's the market, but not just that. And I would like to conclude showing you where you can find this, the book, and above all, the Facebook page, which is not called Occam's Razor, but Occam's Wax. And there you see, I've worked on YouTube. I've also worked on YouTube and Instagram, where I have met a lot of young girls and a lot of beauticians that are really reading what I am writing, and I'm very happy at the fact that beauticians are reading what I've written. So allow me to give you advice for purchases. Follow them. Beware of asterisks, because the asterisks are where the truth lies.
Abbiamo parlato adesso del fatto se le cose funzionino.
I would like to ask you, since we spoke about whether things work or not, I sort of was thinking of tea tree oil and lavender oil, because I use tea tree oil for muscle problems and contractions. So I got a bit concerned. I would like to know what happened with that study, and if in fact there are positive effects due to tea tree oil. Well, tea tree oil and lavender extract have been found to be not dangerous. The first study was the one that was wrong, so you shouldn't worry on the fact whether they work or not. There are results that suggest that extracts, in particular tea tree oil, have certain functions. For instance, they do have an antibacterial activity. The question that you must ask yourself is always, if you're using, you don't clearly use it pure, but you do, is how much, what's the quantity? Do they add enough for it to be an effect? For example, there are shampoos with tea tree oil that would appear to have an anti-dandruff activity, so you have anti-dandruff ones, but on cosmetics it's not compulsory. In fact, we don't do it. We don't have to write the amounts of the ingredients, and so we know that tea tree oil can work if there is a certain quantity of it, but we don't know how much there is in the shampoo. So if the company is serious, they will have put enough, and if not, they would have put a lot, but we have no means to know. So we must ask ourselves, but we can also contact the company. If there are questions, this is the moment. There's already one here. I would like to ask, because I don't understand, if it isn't lavender, and lavender has effects for women. Our grandmothers used to use lavender after birth. And tea tree oil and lavender, I use them and I drink them too. I knew that this would have generated panic. And on molecules, if you're a chemist, it doesn't change as to whether it is lab or not, but if I go and buy porcini mushrooms and ravioli with them, I only want the real thing, I don't want the chemical ones. Yes, but they're still molecules. Well, the smell. In cosmetics, I know that essential oil of lilies of the valley can't be obtained, but Dior had managed to create the molecule in a lab. And since I've discovered that, I no longer use lily of the valley perfume. I understand you. It's legitimate and everybody does what they want. The important thing is that you should have all the information and then you're free to choose the ingredients and to abandon one, or for a religious reason, for example, halal cosmetics are very fashionable now for people who are Muslims. So you can do what you want, but the important thing is that you should have all the information so that you're able to choose and to do so in a manner where you're more aware.
Salve. Lei cosa ne pensa del biodizionario?
What do you think of the biodictionary that assesses ingredients? She's very prepared, yes. I talk about, there's a whole chapter in the book, and that is why I say no to the biodictionary, which answers your question, but now she will explain why. I don't know how many people know what the biodictionary is. It was a website, and now they've split, and there are lots of them. It's also become an app, which basically it gives different color, green, amber, and red, or 2 greens or 2 reds, bad, good, and so on, to various ingredients. So it catalogs all the ingredients and gives them a mark. And every now and again you can see it on some websites or in the beauty bloggers do the same thing. And they put a sort of report. And in the internet world, very often people mention the fact that there are some green or red products according to the number of red and green points that they get. How are these points given? Well, there are people who decide in a very arbitrary manner whether they're going to give a green or 2 greens or a red on the basis of their personal opinion. All the ingredients, as I mentioned before, all the ingredients that are currently on the market in the European Union have to have been approved because they've gone through health and safety. Used in the normal conditions. Of course, we don't know everything, so there are some limits to our knowledge, but all the things that are on the market, on the basis of current knowledge and to the best of our knowledge, should all be green, because they're all safe, except the ones that are banned, and clearly they're banned, so you can't use them. If you do use them, then it's fraud. They should be all green, but in fact there are lots that are amber or red or double red. How do we hand these out? We don't know how they mete it out, because we're never told why it's red or double red, and sometimes we just get a red mark, but simply because it's synthetic rather than being natural. So it was produced in a lab, but this means that someone has a negative opinion of what is produced in a lab. For instance, I'm not bothered by that. If it's a lab product, it's fine. Could be green, but in other cases there might be more environmental impact. On Instagram a while ago, for example, people said, why is palm oil that has a very major environmental impact, not on health, but on the environment, it's clearly a problem. Why why is it green in the dictionary? Well, because it was green. I would say it was because this has had an impact. There was a big discussion because it's not dangerous, but it does have an impact on the environment. And so there was a sort of reaction by a lot of people. So in the end, they decided, but again, it was an arbitrary decision to make it amber. So if you look at palm oil, it's amber. This has nothing to do with a scientific process. It's a sort of haphazard definition. If you agree with them, it's fine, and if you don't agree with them, well, then we disagree. It's an oversimplification. Oh, yes.
Sì, la mia, a dir la verità, è duplice.
My question, well, there are two questions. Apart from my voice, I'm sorry it's croaky, but I hope you'll understand me. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for all the explanations that you gave and in the very friendly manner in which you gave them. Thank you. I will listen to you again.
Allora, io sono ufficialmente anziana. L'avrete sentito?
I'm officially old. You will have heard that. Because you're over that. Yes, I'm over the threshold. I'm officially old. First of all, I just want to make this statement. That is to say, what you said, the use of names, big names, things intended to impress emotionally. Clearly, the marketing uses sentiment analysis. Clearly they do. The second one, this was more of a remark, but the second one is, what about the hyaluronic acid that seems to be everywhere? Because recently a colleague of mine, hearing my voice, that is like this because I taught IT and physics for 43 years, you know, he said, I use a hyaluronic acid spray. Why don't you?
Dentifrici tra un po' lo troviamo.
Even in toothpaste, yes, hyaluronic acid works, but not because of what they tell us. It hydrates. It's a molecule that can have various sizes according to its molecular weight, but it behaves like a sponge. So it absorbs water. So if you put it in creams, for instance, it maintains the skin hydrated. To hydrate the skin doesn't mean that you put water inside. It means to keep the water in. So it's a non-dehydrating cream. Yes, I'll use this in my next book. So hyaluronic acid works very well because it holds our water in. But when we read it on a serum or on a cream or something, we imagine that it is going to penetrate and replace the hyaluronic acid, which with age disappears, the one that we have naturally. So skin sags a bit, same things that you have with joints. So when you put it on the skin, we imagine that hyaluronic acid will penetrate and replace the one that we had. So it will, well, this is what they tell us, so it's easy to believe them. In fact, our skin, and if you think of it, we know it, our skin is a barrier, and it protects us from bacteria, viruses, and so on. So the barrier allows very few molecules to go through, very small ones or that have particular receptors, so very little luckily can be penetrated. So hyaluronic acid, even if it penetrates, it never goes really deep in, because otherwise, if it did, it wouldn't be a cosmetic, but a medicine. Sprays, boop, I don't know.
Ma allora scusi, l'acido ialuronico, io parlo per esperienza mia.
So hyaluronic acid, and I'm talking about my personal experience, Are you talking about it used as a medicine? It doesn't do anything. How was it administered? In my meniscus, twice, 2 or 3 times, and then they injected it. Injected is very different than a cream, but even injected. And since it didn't work, a double dose, and they fractured my meniscus. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm very sorry. So this product, which is put everywhere, I don't think it works well on joints. In this case, we're not talking about cosmetics, but medicine. If they're doing it, I take it that there must be a rationale for it. Clearly, that injecting is very different than rubbing a cream in. Since I too fell for this natural trend, I would like you to know about the type of certifications that there are, both the environmental one and also in terms of health, bio and so on. What do you mean by certificates? For example, the soap, non-soap it has the IAB certification. Oh, yes, it's got all the certificates. Look at them here. They invested a lot. It's free of lots of things, but it has lots of, it has replaced ingredients with certificates. Yes, certificates and certification and quality standards tell you that a certain product followed a certain process, which is required by that standard. For example, biological has a series of rules that are EU rules. And therefore, the certifying organizations or the standards organization has to follow that given rule. But in the world of cosmetics, this doesn't apply. There are hundreds and hundreds of different certificates: organic and natural, bio, eco-bio, bio-controlled, eco-bio, dermo-compatible, all sorts of things. And these are certificates or certifications or standards that tells you that the process was followed and the specifications were followed. This means that a certain percentage of the ingredients of plant origin come from organic farming. The rest of it, there are things that cannot be organic, more minerals, for instance. If you're using eyeshadow, which is basically mineral, it's impossible to have it a bio one. There are types of different certifications or standards that specify, for example, where they've been sourced. So I have no opinion. I just like to tell you in the book there are examples of what lies behind standards. How expensive it is to do this, because we're talking about tens of thousands of euros to have a guarantee of standard. So for a company, this is a major investment, or an investment in any case, and there must be a return on that investment. So the choice of, for instance, to be vegan, which is very fashionable, it's a market one, because you position yourself at a certain market with the bias. This is not vegan. No, I was thinking of the standards of certification of one in particular. The rabbit one. Yes, the soap also has the rabbit. I'll just take this because yes, I showed you at the beginning that it was cruelty-free, which means that it isn't tested on animals. But I said something wrong. I said something true, but it's wrong, because it's true for everyone, because in Europe, for the past 10 years, it is forbidden to experiment on animals for cosmetics, both on the final product this, but also on the individual ingredients. Since 2009, this is banned, and since 2013, it is forbidden to import products that have been tested on animals. So all the products that you can buy in a chemist, in a pharmacy, in beauticians, cannot be tested on animals. So then why do you write cruelty-free if it's forbidden in any case? I wondered about it, and the agency that issues the symbol of the rabbit got very angry. In fact, at one time they used to say cruelty-free, not tested on animals. And then they were fined by the advertising board because it was considered misleading advertising, because they said, oh, the others are cruelty-free. So if you say that you're cruelty-free, then people think that the other soap has been tested on animals. So they've been fined. So now they write stop on animal testing. Well, it can't be fined, at least. So once again, it's an investment, it's marketing. And it addresses itself to an audience that doesn't know but would like to have products which haven't been tested on animals. So when I talk about it, usually people stare at me and say, what does it mean? Why do they tell us this? Let's see if we'll ask them. And one last question. Wait a minute.
Urca.
Wait a minute, you need practical information. Something, what is really bad for your skin? And what do you think about paraffin? Well, I don't think, well, I shouldn't say I don't think anything much of the various ingredients. It's like saying, what do you think of a rainbow? It's there. So paraffin is one of the many ingredients that are used in cosmetics, and they're authorized. So it's not noxious if it is used as it should be according to regulation. But it can create occlusion, which is a technical term to say that it creates a sort of film, but that is also true for oils. If you put olive oil on your face or avocado oil on your face, it will cause an occlusion. Occlusion is not necessarily negative. You have to consider it, and creams in general have to use a bit of hydration, a bit of occlusion, a bit of this and a bit of that. Non-dehydration, like Alberto was saying. You were saying, what is really bad? Sun. Sun. Can I show them a photo?
Vi faccio vedere una foto che secondo me rende benissimo. È un po' forte, quindi se la mandano, ecco. Cosa si è messa questa signora? Allora, questa signora...
What did this woman do? Well, this woman was a bus driver. She was a bus driver. So she always had half of her face on the window side. Which half? She's not English. Well, why? Because I too am white, and I'm very, very white. So if I'm in the sun, I get burnt. And I use creams. But we always monitor the UVBs, which determine whether we're going to be burnt. But the sun also issues or produces UVA rays, because unlike UVB, they're not stopped by the glass, so the woman is not sunburnt, but the UVAs penetrate in the deep. Yes, they're not like hyaluronic acid. They do successfully go in to the deeper layers and they break a lot of the things that they come across, for example, DNA, so mutations that then lead to the development of cancer, but also the collagen, which holds the skin up. So, in the long run, if you take UVAs or UVAs hit your face, you all see that there are more wrinkles. So when I'm asked what is the best anti-wrinkle, if you put a good sunblock, clearly you're not perfect, although there are creams such as this one, which I bought in the States, that has a number as 110 SPF, which is something absolutely crazy. But it's sunblock cream that doesn't protect you 100%, but it filters the UVB rays, and the number refers to the UVBs or the UVAs, and according to the filters. So the answer is use them. I would like to ask a very general question, given the parabens. Since it is a rather particular period for pseudoscience, the people have been talking about biodynamic farming. I would like to know if something can be done in legal terms, that is to say, if you as popularizers aren't you fighting like against windmills? Is there something that can be done in legal terms to block all this? Well, in terms of the law, what are you going to do? Are you going to ban things? You can't ban people to think, or you can't ban people from believe, say, the influence of stars on broccoli, or you can't avoid people fearing things. The only thing you can do, but in the case of cosmetics, the European Commission has done it very effectively. You can put a lot of definitions and a lot of obstacles to protect consumers. So other than what is said, we know that what is on the market tends to be safe, at least as compared to the rest of the world. The European Union is the safest place to buy cosmetics. On the rest of it, maybe it's fighting windmills, possibly, but, well, we can't save the world. I wouldn't even call it a battle. My job is to tell people and to give young and not so young people of different social layers. I mean, I was talking about beauticians, and people have to sort it out themselves. I'm not going to go there and say, save your soul. I just am an information person. I'm a popularizer of science. Yes, the last slide that we saw, that is to say, the one on creams. What about the content? Was the content analyzed? That is to say, if you to the one comparing the supermarket cream to the expensive one, there was no visible effect. I would like to know whether the contents of the cream. Yes, there's a big difference between one cream and the other. One was Chanel with 52 ingredients, and the other one was Nivea with 15 ingredients, some of which are the same, and many of them are not. Well, is the difference significant? It is not, in that you can't perceive a difference at the end. Had they seen a difference, then you could have asked themselves, what is this due to? But since there was no difference, and then if I'm not a mistake, this was a study on perception. Right, thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you, Beatrice Mautino. The book is outside, and Beatrice will be only too pleased to sign copies for you and to answer any other question. Thank you very much.